Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny panel for Environment, Communities and Partnerships, and Happy New Year. Before we start on the agenda, I just want to welcome back Councillor Welton. Nice to see you again. And we'll move on with the agenda. Any apologies? We've got two, or have we got three?
We have three apologies. We have apologies from Councillors Harvey, Lowe and Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. So moving on to item 2, members' interests. Has anyone got any interest they need to declare? No? Okay, then we'll move on to the working programme. Has everyone had a good read of it? Anyone want to say anything about it? Make any notes about it? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, I just want to put on record that I think we've got quite a bit of work to get through. I'd just want to put on record thanks to officers for helping to pull it together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? And then we'll move on to item 4.
Do you want me just
Oh, yes.
So just to jump in at this point, we've been made aware that it's been requested that we move the biodiversity item to item 4 to allow it to then flow into the open spaces item, which would allow a better flow of train of thought for the agenda. And we're proposing to move the civil parking enforcement item to item 4 instead. So just to switch those two items around. Is there any issue with that? Is everyone happy? I think hopefully it'll allow for a better flow of discussion by doing that. So if everybody's happy with that, we propose to move the civil parking enforcement item first.
Just before we do that, my apologies, I missed out item 1 minutes.
Sorry.
It's fine. Has everyone had a read and are they happy with the minutes? Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. So then moving on to what we now call item 4, but which item 5, civil parking enforcement. Everyone's had a read of it.
Okay, Neil.
Yes. Neil, are you going to give us a brief summary? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, panel. And I think Happy New Year. There were lots of Happy New Years last night, so might as well follow up with that again today. Unfortunately, George can't be here because he's poorly. He's literally just rang me. He was intending to be here, so I'll do a pale imitation of George. But firstly, portfolio holder would like to do an introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. And thank you for throwing me in at the deep end. When I wasn't ready, you switch the items around. Right, let's go for it. Okay, so this report is an update on the progress of delivery of the civil parking enforcement within Huntingdonshire. It covers the go live, warning notice approach, CPE stakeholders briefing, which I think is really important, and I hope that members will give me lots of comments on that. And the new expected go live date and the signing of the patrol agreement. I do want to say, for the benefit of residents that may be watching, explain briefly what CP is, civil parking enforcement. It is sometimes referred to as the decriminalisation of parking, which is a process that decriminalises a number of on-street parking offences, enabling them to be enforced as a civil matter by the local authority, which would be us. At present, until the CPE is established, these offences may only be enforced by the police in Huntingdonshire. Just a little bit of statistics. There are only 5 out of 327 areas in England not designated as civil enforcement areas. Of those 5, 3 are in Cambridgeshire. I was pleased when the previous administration approved to pursue the CPE in Huntingdonshire in 2021. I'm sure as members, you always receive concerns from residents about inconsiderate and dangerous parking in your towns and parishes. I know I have over many years, and I have worked with the police to try and alleviate the problems in our towns. However, also knowing that the police do not have the resource to implement the enforcement, I think as members you realise this. I am, as is the Joint Administration, still very committed to bringing the CPE into our district. And I will leave the technical questions for Neil.
Okay, so tonight it's an update on CPE. There's a lot of work that's been happening in partnership with the County Council and the District Council. It's important to say that the powers are applied for by the County Council from the Department for Transport. And then we have an agency agreement, which then means that we then have the license to use those powers. So very much this is a collaboration with County Council Highways colleagues and ourselves, and we're working on that project together. And we've had very, very productive progress with the County Council on that project. So we're outlining the progress, which has been pretty much behind the scenes. They're not visible things that you can see, but lots has been happening. And hopefully, if there are any detailed questions about those works, I can answer those for you. Just to say that although there is a delay, that delay is due to external factors, which is essentially the programming of the government. They have a busy schedule. And so as soon as the County Council applied for their first tranche, which is South Cams, they got some feedback that actually they're a bit behind things at government in terms of looking at those applications. So this is the opportunity that we've had to bring that delay for your attention. So it's no fault of the County Council or the District Council, and to reassure the panel as well that the work is continuing at the same pace. So if there is an opportunity that it could go earlier, then we will be able to take that with our County Council colleagues and ourselves. We're continuing on the same project plan. And so we're currently sort of finalising the details of the procurement for signs and lines works. And then as soon as the weather situation improves in the spring, then that's when we'll start seeing contractors out on the ground, making sure that everything is to the enforceable standard that's required. So there's a couple of recommendations in the report we're making to Cabinet in terms of sort of our approach for warning notices, because that's one of the first decisions that we can make. And then also in terms of updating stakeholders in the committee, because one of the things we want to do is make sure there's a constant flow of information as we get closer to implementation. So really it's over to the panel, and if there are any questions for myself, as George cannot be here, sadly.
Thank you, Neil and Councillor Taylor. Before we move into comments, I just want to thank you for the report. It's been actually very helpful to have an update so I can let the residents who asked me about it know. Much appreciated. So anyone got any comments for Neil or Councillor Taylor? Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I echo Councillor Taylor's comments that we do get. I certainly get residents coming on to me in my ward about selfish parking. Home is a particular case near the school, Stilton in the centre of the village. One of the pleas I would make before I come on to the question is the communication. I think there's only myself, perhaps Councillor Bywater and Councillor Criswell who were on the panel when this came before. So there's a lot of us on this panel that don't know what work has already been done. So as part of the communication, I think it's worth rebriefing about what we've actually decided. I think Councillor Criswell summed it up when we were discussing it before as what we're actually voting for. I think it was an eye-opener for me when it came to discussing where the civil parking enforcement officers won't have any discretion. A vehicle is either parked correctly or it's not, and then it goes to appeal. So that was as part of the learning processing. That was something I picked up. The other plea I would make is as well, because this sort of hit the press and then died down as part of the process that we've gone through, is that the communication extends through our comms team, out through social media, out through the press to explain to people, because I think we can all almost predict, oh, this is just a money-making exercise for the county council, for the district council, when it clearly isn't. But I think that needs explaining. The other thing as a rural councillor is that the rural villages, the rural parts of Huntingdonshire, don't get missed out at the expense of Huntingdon, St Neots, and St Ives in particular. I know from Neil and I have spoken before, there is a lag when officers are travelling away from Eastfield House out to rural villages, but I'm sure my ward isn't the only one. In fact, I know it's not, with problems. So they're my comments and pleas. The question is just about, in terms of priority and the tranche, what determines where Huntingdonshire is in comparison to South Cambs and Fenland? I know East Cambs are going their own way. And in terms of priority, why are East Cambs that much further along, working with the same county council that we are? I'm not making a niggly point. I'm just interested to know how it all works. Thank you, Chair.
So thank you, Councillor Olwen, for your comments. And if I may say, civil parking enforcement for a rural district, it is actually something which will be an increase in cost to the parking operation because of exactly what you've mentioned in terms of rural enforcement. In an area like Cambridge City or Peterborough, where there isn't that travel, then it tends to break even. But when you start to add in that rural travel dimension, that's when the costs, it doesn't quite stack up. But that was part of the basis of voting for the decision and why the council wanted to move forward. So you're absolutely right in that regard. In terms of the balance of enforcement, absolutely. The point of enforcement is compliance. So therefore, the degree of compliance is what will determine where the enforcement is. So what we tend to find is that you'll have a pocket of, inconsiderate parking, if you will. We will then enforce on that. Then for a period of time, people tend to be compliant in that area. But then you have to then move the enforcement to another area where perhaps there is a growth in inconsiderate. So it will be flexible and it will depend on that areas. And actually, the relationship with yourselves as ward councillors will be critical in that enforcement process, because some of that intelligence from the ground needs to be fed back to us so that we can flex and bend it. So it really will be an ongoing discussion of where the priorities are and where the issues are. In terms of the tranches, it was quite simple in the fact that Cambridge County Council operate the parking for the City Council already. South Camden City, their funding and their agreement was decided by the Greater Cambridgeshire Authority, that union. So therefore, it's almost an expansion of existing service rather than a new one. Whereas for East Cambs going their own way, Fenland and ourselves, we're actually setting up as a separate enforcement operation. It's not viable for the team in City and South Cambs to travel to Huntingdon to do enforcement, for example. So purely it's on the basis of the fact that theirs was an extension, so that was first. Then we were next out of the stocks. And we've been supporting Fenland with some of their considerations, but we're considerably further ahead than Fenland. And actually much of the work that we've done has informed South Cambs in terms of some of that approach with county. So it was purely that relationship, and that's why they've done one at a time. Basically, it's the same agency agreement mirrored across all the authorities, and actually the audit of the signs and lines is the thing that takes the time. And so because we're a rural district, the biggest rural district, that's taken a little bit longer than South Cambs as well. So we needed a little bit longer to start and finish that work. So it's not sort of like a race. It's just that we've had some bigger jobs to do to make sure that it's been done properly to the standard required. I hope that helps to explain to the panel.
Chair, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I just pick up on your point where we're looking at comms? Obviously, within the report, we've got 4.5 stakeholders briefing and the update approach. So absolutely, this is only about briefing our own councillors, our own towns and parishes. And so I am glad that you have spoken about our residents, because that is something that I am very keen to do. When we do it, I'm not quite sure. When's the appropriate time? I'm not quite sure. But I think you have a good point there, through the chair. And I would like to take that back to officers and explore when is the right time to go out on social media. Whether we do it now and it becomes something that people think that might already be happening and getting confused, that I think we've just got to get the timing right. But I really do think we need to get this out to our residents, because it's something that will affect them. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. I agree with you. In St Ives, if you look on the social media pages, it's constantly full of illegal parking. I think it only comes second to the car trap in St Ives. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, good report. I'm fully behind this. It's a long time coming, but I understand that there's things that are outside our control. So totally get that. I guess my question is just in relation to timing, and I know the report touches on the warning notice period right at the go live stage, and we all as councillors we get a huge amount of grief complaints in relation to school parking outside schools. There's lots of yellow lines, and we're due to get some yellow lines in Sawtry outside the school, and it's great because the timing has to be perfect. I guess my only concern is if we've got a 4-week window to, if we go with the 4 weeks at the go live date and it's the beginning of the school summer holidays, for example, then we just need to be careful about the timing of when we do that, because what will happen is if that does happen after the school summer holidays, for example, then we'll get a lot of irate parents saying, I didn't know anything about it. So we've got to make sure the comms is spot on, because then people can't argue that they're going to get a ticket for illegal parking, because, I think, but comms for me is crucial, really. And then the only other sort of concern I've got is just about, you talk about the enforceable standards and the costs of, getting the signs up to the enforceable standard, because if they're not, and I speak from my own policing background, there'll be wriggle room for not being able to issue endorsable tickets or non-endorsable tickets. So I guess that's the cost control for you to manage, really. So, but yeah, fully behind this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question, but also follow up with a comment. So my question was just around in point 3.1, the annual anticipated deficit of around 60,000 per year. As it's an anticipated, I wanted to know how we'd kind of come to that figure, and sort of how that had come to being. And just to follow up with a comment that, having looked at this, I did a bit of work and looked at what Fenland have been discussing, and only in December they actually didn't have any anticipated budget deficit, and they're now looking to find out how they're going to cover the increase in costs around all the signs and lines and everything else. So I just wanted to say well done to the team for actually, well, to everybody for having that forethought, that we're not in the same position.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Yeah, at the moment, Fenland don't have charged car parks, so it's quite a big step for them because they currently don't have any enforcement, and so therefore we've been trying to help the team and support the team. Our advisors were actually taken on by the county council in terms of this progress, which hopefully reassures members that we're on the front foot. My personal experience is managing a joint shared parking service in Hertfordshire as well when decriminalisation went live. So there's a bit of that in there as well, just to reassure you as well. In terms of the costs, we did modelling informed by professional parking associates who have been advising us on that on the transition. They've used models from rural councils that are benchmarkable to us. So I've mentioned Hertfordshire, and we've had Hertfordshire's figures, and so that's looked at how much it costs to operate and enforce in terms of travel, and then the likelihood in terms of a level of compliance that you would get in a typical rural district, and it nets out at that kind of 60,000 level. It's fair to say that in the short term it is bigger than that. That's what it settles down to in the model after 3 years, because there is that transition of more tickets to issue to get more compliance at the start, and actually we've got a slightly higher level of staffing at the start, and then it reduces down. And one of the things that we discussed at the time of implementation, which I think is, bears out sort of some of the discussions we had sort of a few years ago when we looked at this, was that it was important that we retained the enforcement staff ourselves to start off with, because then we had the flexibility to get it to the right size, to minimize the deficit and to react. Then after that period of time, we would then look at alternative options and to see whether it was still better to do it ourselves, or whether there was other options available. But we do know that it is cheaper for us to do it than, for example, City through their enforcement services, because we looked at that as an option very early on as well. So hopefully that gives the panel reassurance that we have a good cost basis. It was based on comparison, and as a portfolio holder has said, there's 5 authorities left to do this. So there's all the others of that good example, and they have to produce annual reports by law of what the costs are and what the level of enforcement is. So obviously all of that information has been used to inform the modelling. So we're not at the very start of implementation. We're at the sort of the rear end, benefiting from all of their experiences.
Thank you. That really clarifies it. Thank you. Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Chair. My question's actually on a similar vein. Obviously, mentioned the 60,000 potential cost. I understand it's not a revenue exercise, but does it have to cost us money? I.e., are the penalties fixed in legislation? Could we charge more and essentially generate revenue from it in the future?
So by law, civil parking enforcement cannot make a surplus. It shouldn't. It should operate at a loss. And there's an annual reporting which demonstrates that. If you do make a surplus, then that surplus is then ring-fenced to transport from the actual enforcement activity itself. In terms of, does it have to make a loss? We can always reduce the amount of enforcement that we do. But what you'll tend to find is then you'll end up with less compliance. So it's that balancing act. And so the modelling dictates that we anticipate that the net impact on parking, and obviously that's paid for out of the pay and display parking, isn't it? So in essence, that's where that money comes from. So hopefully that explains it. But under law, you cannot operate this. You can't target a level of income from your penalty charges. We tend to look at rates of issue to just make sure that we're being productive and that kind of stuff, but you can't target that either under the legislation, because the idea is compliance. So you can't set a target for the income that you'll get from penalties issued, because the idea is you don't issue any.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Hunt.
Cool. Quick question on the application, because it needs to be laid before Parliament. Do we have a rough idea when that would be? And then at some point, probably before this, politics aside, there will be a general election, which means a month where Parliament is dissolved. Would that possibly be a risk to the timeline? And is that captured anywhere?
Sorry, my computer is just locked and I was trying to unlock it. In the report, there is a section on risks, and it is flagged up as a risk because sadly there is that issue. However, it's regular business of government as well. So it's not subject to a change in policy. So it's something that the civil service will churn through. So yes, it's possible, but it is regular business. So we suck it and see. In terms of when we're applying, that's been set as part of the schedule. So the new anticipated date is the date. That's the only thing that's controlling when we go live. So at the moment, it's scheduled. They know it's coming. That's when it's being submitted for processing. So that's the date that's been registered by the county council with the government at the moment.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it has been flagged as a risk with possible, a general election. And I think we'd be foolish not to recognise that. And I'm really, really hoping that this project does not slip, because I really am wanting this to happen, because it's affecting so many people's lives, inconsiderate parking. So I've got my fingers crossed.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Chair. How confident are you that the costs from the tender process would come within the budget? Is there any flexibility in that? If the quotes you get back from the lines and signs work is higher than anticipated, is there any flexibility in the budget on that at all?
So one of the things that we've been doing is that the parking attendants have actually been going around and checking to see whether there are any additional works or anything that might cause a problem. That's been really positive. So the anticipation is that we will be within budget. So we've gone through it all, we've estimated it. We've had consultants generate the brief, and then we've also double checked it and used that time. So the likelihood is we'll hit the budget with the provision that we've got, which is made up of the money that we've agreed with the county council, because we're going to tender, because that was more cost effective than using the county council's framework, because that factored in a load of things that we didn't feel were necessary, and that's been borne out by our consultants in terms of looking at it. So we haven't paid the contractor to develop the brief, because we've developed the brief and that's been given. So based on that and the provision that we've got, and also the council had a provision from its previous parking strategy, so therefore that is the wiggle room that we're using on this. So yeah, very confident at this stage. Yeah.
Councillor Orban.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned there are two other councils outside of Cambridgeshire that don't have CPE at the moment. If you're able to, could you let us know what they are, just so we can get an idea of what kind of councils they are? And just picking up on your point where you said about councils aren't allowed to make a profit, and you say occasionally if they do, that money has to then put back into transport. How many councils over a year roughly would accidentally make a profit? Put that just to put things into perspective.
I think it's fair to say they don't, because they have to report it. But we can look at those reports for you, because the British Parking Association do a summary on that. So we could send that as information afterwards, if that would be helpful. The other councils I know are Suffolk, so they are similar kind of natures to ours, where sadly the cost of enforcement outweighs the cost of operating the service, which is sort of what you'd expect, that they're the councils where there are other cost considerations that are making it more challenging to implement.
Thank you, Chair. The reason for the question is the comparison authorities. That's reassuring that we're fitting in the same kind of model. And in terms of councils unintentionally making a profit, I think I'm anticipating questions we might get from residents that will question this. That it isn't a big problem. It just reinforces the message that this isn't a money generating machine, and that it gives us the background to answer the questions that we might get. That's really useful, Chair. Thank you.
And it's something that could go out in the comms as well, possibly highlighting that. Yeah. Councillor, Neil.
Just to reassure you, that annual report for parking will bring that through scrutiny. So there'll be scrutiny on the level of income, what we're spending it on, where the enforcement is, the types of contraventions, so you can see the balance of what that is happening as well. So there'll be full oversight for this committee of that report, and that annual report will be presented to you before it's published on the website as well for scrutiny.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Shaw.
Sorry, it's on the same topic still. Does the restriction on not making a profit mean you'd have to limit how many penalty notices could be issued?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Any other comments or questions? No, well, in that case, thank you so much for your presentation. And I too await this coming through. I think most of us do really look forward to this. I think it's been long awaited, isn't it? And I think from residents as well, it's going to make a big difference in the district. Thank you. So moving on then to those comments, we'll go through to the cabinet. Thank you. So switching things around, we're now moving on to biodiversity for all, the strategic open spaces. Everyone's had a chance to read the paper.
There's some officers to present.
Yeah, there's some officers that will present. Thank you.
Thank you. So Davenport Ray's joining us by Zoom for this one.
Good evening. Good evening, Councillor Davenport Ray.
Good morning from Seattle. I'm a little bit farther away, but I'm here with you tonight. So biodiversity for all strategic spaces. So tonight you have with us Helen, who leads the open spaces team, and Nick, who leads the biodiversity for all project. But I wanted to start off with just a little bit about why we're here and why we're working on these things. There's an organization called the State of Nature. And over the last 50 years, they've been looking at nature across the UK. And as of this year, sadly, they've found that the UK is now one of the most nature depleted countries on the earth. And even worse than that, 1 in 6 species in Great Britain are now threatened with extinction. So when we talk about nature recovery, this is humans trying to help nature recover from the effects of humans. And that's why we're here and we're talking about these topics. I also wanted to draw your attention to the Appendix 1 in your report. So this is a glossary of different terms. And so just to be really clear about what we're talking about, biodiversity includes both animals and plants. And it's interested in increasing the variety of plants and animals that we have in Huntingdonshire. So as an example, an area that has very little biodiversity would be like a golf course. So you have grass being the predominant species of plant, and in fact, probably just one species of plant being preferred over the others. So that would be at one extreme. And then the other extreme in biodiversity would be an area where there's a large variety of plants and a large variety of animals. And then if you look down your glossary, a few other things to note. Biodiversity net gain, what does that mean? Although it seems slightly callous to think about nature in terms of numbers, scientists have developed a way of measuring biodiversity so that we do have some comparisons we can make to determine what is the biodiversity of a site before humans try to improve it, and then a score of biodiversity after. And so you'll hear the officers talk about some of those numbers later. It doesn't mean we value more species one over the other, but we need a way to be able to benchmark ourselves and know if we've made any progress in helping nature. The other thing to note in the glossary there is there's some mentions about 10% as a goal for biodiversity improvement. That number comes from the Environment Act, which is coming into force. It's already become an act. It's coming into force early this year. And when we receive new planning applications as a planning authority, they will have to be able to demonstrate a gain of 10% in plant and animal diversity on their site. So in the same way that we are going to expect that from planning applications, we're thinking about ensuring that all of the council's work on its own land also meets that expectation. So there are 4 elements really that the council is working on now in terms of nature recovery. The first is alternative land management, ALM. And Matthew from the ops team came with me a few months ago to give you an update on this. So alternative land management is an idea that was inspired by our own council. It's paid for by our own council. It works well on very small plots. And next month, at your meeting in February, Matthew and I will come back and give you an update on how that project has gone. So that's the sites where you will have seen the little signs that say "Why the long grass." So that's outside of what we're going to talk about today. The second element of nature recovery in Huntingdonshire is called the Community Biodiversity Fund. So that's linked to biodiversity for all, and it's how local people and communities and parish councils can identify their own sites where they want to increase biodiversity, And those sites don't have to be land owned by HDC. And that project is funded by the combined authority. So that's a project that Helen and Nick are leading on, but that's not what we're talking about today. The third element of nature recovery that Huntingdonshire is involved in is strategic sites. So that is specifically what the report is about today. So for strategic sites, our work is limited to land owned by HDC and also plots that are quite large. And that's why we don't see in the list locations like Warboys or Sawtree or other places where we'd like to encourage biodiversity. But because we're thinking strategically, we need to find sites that are strategically important green spaces that influence nature across our whole district. And so this work is also funded by the combined authority. So that's what we'll be talking about today. But there is also a fourth arm of nature recovery work going on at the moment in our area, and that's called local nature recovery strategy, just to make it more confusing. So this is a scheme that's also part of the Environment Act. So it's a scheme funded by and organized by DEFRA. And what that means is countywide across all of Cambridgeshire, all of the authorities are working together on how to improve nature, but also how to prioritize which elements of Cambridgeshire's nature do we want to improve first, and try to come up with a prioritization list. So again, that's funded by DEFRA, and it's a countywide project. And I have asked the lead county officer to come and speak to you, or actually all members in the near future, to tell you about what's going on there. But I think what's really interesting is that the work on all the other three topics I mentioned really shows Huntingdonshire in the lead, thinking about these questions in preparation for the overall county work. And in some ways, we're ahead of our peers. So we will be approaching that countywide prioritization of nature without already having our own list of what are our key sites in Huntingdonshire? What do they need to have done to them to increase the number of species on those sites? And so we're sort of leading the way on three areas in order to prepare ourselves for the fourth area, which is the overarching county approach. But today, so again, the thing we're talking about today is strategic sites, so large sites owned by HDC specifically, and using combined authority funding to increase biodiversity on them. We'll have other opportunities to talk about the other three subjects in the months to come. So officers Nick and Helen are going to run through the report, and then at the end, I'll be available for questions.
Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Okay. Good evening, all. My name's Nicholas Massey, and I am the project manager for the Biodiversity for All project. Thank you to Councillor Davenport-Ray for giving the introduction to us, and yeah, good evening, all. I'm going to give a quick extra bit of background to the project, and then I will talk through the first purpose of the report and give you a run through of how we came up with the scoring system and the decision making process. And then I will move on to the second purpose of the report and explain why we are going out to commission a delivery partner. But first of all, just to reiterate what the portfolio holder said, this is one aspect of the Biodiversity for All project that is funded through the combined authority. Other work will be able to be delivered on external sites, but that is through different parts of the project. As Councillor Davenport-Ray mentioned, this is just our HDC owned or managed sites that are large and strategic, of strategic important value to us. There are 13 sites in total that we conducted audits on to baseline and measure what habitats are there and what the potential uplifts could be. And if I direct you to page 6 of the report, you'll see a flowchart there that sort of sets out the parks that we looked at, the strategic open spaces, where their locations are, and that first bit under point 1, biodiversity audits, the baseline. As Lara mentioned, we measure them in the biodiversity units, which Natural England have created. And you can get a sense of how many units are existing in each of those sites there. From that, we look at the different considerations, the first being the Lawton Review, which looks at bigger, better, and more connected. So how these sites connect to the wider regions, what the potential is size-wise and biodiversity-wise. Then we look at considerations such as footfall, which ties into the social and economic value of these sites, the educational opportunities, the impact on the local residents, and the operational constraints that we might come up against in those sites. From that, we move on to sorting these into tranches, referring to the potential uplift in biodiversity units. So we've done this in quite a quantitative way, where we've looked at what the potential uplift in biodiversity units is for each site, and then added in the considerations that I've just mentioned. And we have tried to sort these into 3 different tranches. Now, when we look at the long-term and the medium-term tranche, this doesn't mean that they are any less important to us, but it just might mean that there could have been work already delivered on those sites. For example, Hinchingbrook Country Park has already delivered, I'd say 95% of the recommendations from the biodiversity audit delivered. Same for Oxmoor Park as well. A huge amount of work has already been delivered. So a lot of these gains have already been made. So therefore, when we recommend Spring Common, Priory Park and Hill Rise, these are our recommendations for where we focus in the short term. Now, this project will directly link into the corporate priorities as well. I forgot to mention that in my little intro. So priority 1, improving quality of life for local residents. This is hugely important to us, and I've listed out in point 8, bottom of page 7, leading on to page 8, how we will enable an influence on priority 1, which is improving quality of life for local people, and priority 2, creating a better Huntingdonshire for future generations. This also directly links into our climate strategy, as it focuses on the nature aspect within that strategy. Then if we move on to the second purpose of the report, which is to get consent to commission a delivery partner. Now, learning from previous approaches that we have taken, such as ALM, we understand the importance of working with the community to make sure that they are part of this journey and are happy with everything that we are doing, because it is much their park as it is ours. So therefore, the delivery partner will look at engagement, co-design, and then moving forward with the delivery and the evaluation side. Can I open it up to any questions, if anyone has any?
Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, unless I've missed it. What does MKA mean, and what is a unit? How do you quantify a unit? I've got no, a millimetre I can understand, but that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
So MKA is a company that was commissioned to deliver the ecological audits. They're called MKA Ecology. I can't quite remember exactly what the MKA stands for, but they're an ecology consultancy. And biodiversity units are defined by Natural England, and they can vary. So there will be a full breakdown of certain types of habitats and how many units they contain. So it's been scientifically defined to help us with measurements. So a certain type of habitat will have and size of habitat will have a certain amount of units associated to it, given the types that there are. The ecological side of things is not my speciality. So breaking it down, I'm the project manager side. We have brought in 2 ecologists to support us with this. However, if you go to Appendix D, So that's a summary of the table from MKA. You have the breakdown of the key findings from those audits. So it will give you the current status of the park. Now, this is purely for biodiversity purposes. That is not to say that mostly poor or mostly moderate is any reflection on the maintenance regimes. This is just the biodiversity value that's there. Then looking at the habitat units in total, you can see that they are broken down by units and linear types and hedgerow types, river types. So there are different types of habitats that have different units associated with them, and it depends on the size and the quality of them. Hopefully that's explained it.
Honestly, no. And us not keeping up. Is it a formula that it's square meters times? That's what I'm after. I'm trying to put it all into perspective.
I think,
Hiya, good evening. Sorry.
yes.
Councillor Davenport-Ray wants to
Yeah,
jump in.
yeah, we'll let Councillor Davenport-Ray speak. Thank you.
I can tell that this is an subject of great interest to members about biodiversity units. And we're not the only ones learning about this. The public are learning about this as well. So it's a steep learning curve. And so what I might suggest is that we have a separate session where we talk specifically about how biodiversity units are calculated. Because ecology in general is an area where councils in the past have not had their own resources, had their own ecologist. And so I'm quite proud of our council's approach to working with Anglia-Ruskin University and bringing in some graduate ecologists so that they're learning on the job, but we're building Huntingdonshire's skill base in ecology. And so perhaps we could have a separate session to talk about what is a biodiversity unit, how it's calculated. It's much more complicated than just the area of land times the types of species you have. There are lots of different variables that go into the calculation.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to come back in? Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. You talked about co-design and kind of engagement with the community, which I think will be really good and really vital in this. Can you give us a bit more information, if you could, about how that could possibly work, or if you've done it in the past, how it's run then?
Yeah, of course. So the way that we envisage this is opening it up to the public to come and give their views on what they'd like to see happen in the area. We can give presentations on what the recommendations are, try and explain why these recommendations have been given, but ultimately we want this to be a co-design exercise. So there'll be numerous approaches such as workshops, and we will make ourselves accessible to the public.
Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very good report, and thank you very much. I'm learning a lot about this as we move through it. I guess the only thing that I might get a challenge, and you as members might get a challenge, is about the budget for this and the cost of it. You know, what there's no figures in here. I mean, is there any sort of total of this, the cost of it? Really, I just want to try and understand that, so that if I'm challenged about the cost, this is a good idea, but how much is it costing the district council when, in a couple of months' time, we'll be asking people to pay more in council tax, really? So I just, I want to know the answer, really.
Does anyone want to come in on that? Councillor Davenport-Ray, did you have an idea?
Sorry, I was.
Yes.
So this is externally funded through the combined authority. So we successfully secured a grant from them of 1.3 million for the overall project. This project will account for a large chunk of that because it's working on our own large strategic sites. We are hoping to go, well, we've done some initial scoping of the tender, but it very much depends on what the final plan of delivery looks like, as in what work is agreed to before we actually have a final figure to give. Hopefully that makes sense. And there is a breakdown of the potential works that could be delivered there, which is in Appendix E, and it will show the potential uplift in biodiversity there. Now we need to make sure that we are looking for the most cost-effective way to achieve the highest uplift we can for biodiversity. But as I said, this will very much depend on what the figures come back to us from the tender exercise are.
Oliver, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just, there's things like on page 38, Huntingdon, Stukely Meadows, it talks about ambitious ditch restoration projects involving the removal of concrete reinforcement and remeandering of the channel. That seems rather expensive, when we start talking about removing concrete and stuff like that. So, yes, I understand it's from the combined authority. I just want to be clear to my residents how much it's going to cost, really. Thank you.
Of course, yes, these are all just options. This isn't a set program of work. This is just giving examples of what could be done and the potential uplift it would have.
Can I just add to that? So when we actually, it's almost like a chicken egg situation we've got here. We want to get the best possible outcome for the residents, but we want to find out what the residents want. So we've sort of got an indicative budget at the moment. The procurement will go out publicly, so actually it will be out there what's being spent on the project, and it actually is all entirely contained in the project, as is the cost of the delivery team and the graduates and everything. So I think we're sort of squeezing every last penny out of that grant.
And then another bite at the cherry, Councillor Bywell. So a really straightforward question. I think the key point here that's really sort of come through is this is a really emergent area of work, and it's very, very new. And as Councillor Davenport Ray has said, we're right at the forefront of some of these things. Now, all of the cost of the work that Nick and the team are doing is within that external bid from the CPCA. I think the other aspect of this is the changes that are coming in nationally with biodiversity net gain and responsibilities that sit on developers to offset the impact of some of the work they're doing. And I think one of the things we can see over time as we quantify where we are is the potential for this to actually attract funding from others as part of that offsetting process. But in order to do that, this baseline is really critical. So whilst there have been delays in some of that biodiversity net gain work nationally, that's kind of been delayed a little bit. But I think this puts us in a really great position going forward to potentially benefit Huntingdonshire at the expense of other people who are looking to offset some of their impacts they're having elsewhere.
Thank you, Oliver. That makes sense. Councillor Davenport Ray, did you want to come in?
Yes, I would. First, I'd like to come back to Councillor Hunt's question about community involvement. So to give you an example, Neil and I spent some time in St. Ives at a St. Ives Eco Action meeting some of the interested environmental groups in St. Ives. I think perhaps Councillor Kerr was there as well. So that's sort of the beginning of a conversation about there's Berman Park in St. Ives. What does the community who lives around it want to happen there at the same time as increasing biodiversity? So it can literally be a verbal conversation with the communities. And then Councillor Albin's question about funding. And also I think remeandering a river might be the vocabulary word of 2024. But in terms of funding, one of the reasons why the combined authority is funding this project is because we're doing something in advance that we will also be able to teach others. So the funding coming from the combined authority means we have skills that we're learning through this project that we will be able to share with the other authorities in the combined authority. So once they catch up with us a little bit and they're starting to think about these things, we will have developed some of the schemes that they could copy. And then also, I think across the report, we use the word strategic a few times, and I want to talk a bit about what does that mean. So a strategic site, to me, that strategicness is threefold. The first is, well, can you increase the amount of biodiversity by a large amount? That might be strategic. But also, does the site offer a stepping stone or a corridor for nature where natural sites can be linked together? Because that's quite strategic for nature. But this is also about people. So can the site be of benefit to local people? Is it near to an area of social deprivation where people are going to be able to walk to it and enjoy nature there to benefit their own health? So there are a couple of different elements of what strategic means in this context. And further, in terms of it being for the benefit of people, in some cases, the improvement work in biodiversity can be done through a scheme that's called groundwork. And that means that job seekers can choose to come and help work on improving sites and earn an NVQ and gain some confidence in themselves while they're seeking work. So again, trying to build up the skill base within Huntingdonshire of our own people to be able to look after our natural spaces in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Burke, you had a question.
Well, again, a comment and a question. Just looking at the timetable for implementation, it's great to see that it's a really kind of proactive approach in that it's very much happening, and it's very clear. Just in terms of things like community engagement and education, and I can only relate this to Hill Rise in St Ives. It's an area I know very well. It's used quite regularly by other organisations, for example, the Carnival and Music Festival. So it'd be really good to kind of reach out to those sorts of organisations, but also to educate them on how they can support what we're trying to achieve. Particularly when you look at the event as it currently is, with lots of vehicles running generators and things like that. So there's lots of incredible work that we're looking to do, and it would just be a really great time to be able to get them on board as well. And I just wondered if that was something that had already kind of been sort of thought about, and what was happening.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind comments about Hill Rise. Actually, we're just about to hear from the Open Spaces team, and we'll be using the Open Spaces team quite heavily in terms of making sure we're connected to the right stakeholders and community groups around all of our open spaces. Because you're right, they are the community, and they're the ones that can actually really get our voice out there. One of the things our graduate ecologists are actually working on at the moment is massively simplifying this. So we're actually turning it into almost like a child-friendly tool that we can actually then take out to the community and actually help them to start to understand the idea of a unit and actually how that actually is built up. So once we get to that point, we can share that with you guys. But then actually, we want to use that as a tool to talk to our communities that are using our open spaces.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see this item on our agenda and it's going forward to Cabinet. I think you may have answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway, just for clarification. The 1.3 million external funding mentioned in section 2.1, is that specifically allocated for this project, or is that also for other biodiversity projects outside the scope of this report?
Thanks for your question. Yes, the full amount of funding covers the entire span of the Biodiversity for All project. There is a breakdown of the other elements of the project in Appendix A. So this report just covers one of those, but the entire funding will cover every aspect set out in Appendix A.
Councillor Hunt.
Cool. I asked this purely out of my own curiosity, but would we be able to get a copy of each of the audits? Just because of, I think that would be really useful for all of us as ward members just to see and look at these places through another light that we might not have seen.
Yes, absolutely. We've been in discussions about putting them on the website for everyone to see. So that's a work in progress.
Yeah, that would be absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
I'd like to see that too. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your brilliant presentation. And it's really exciting to see we're actually first out of the blocks here in Huntingdonshire. And yeah, I'm so excited what we're going to do with this money in this investment. Thank you. So moving on then to agenda item 6, an open spaces update. I think it. Yes, we're having a presentation. Thank you. So Taylor, are you going to start it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. So this update is for members to understand and hopefully appreciate what the open space team have been working on over the last year, plus the projects planned for this year and beyond. The open space team are a tiny team. They're not a big team. They only have 6 officers. But however, they do pack a lot into their time, as you will see in the presentation. I am sure members see open spaces as an essential part of life. I know I do. They are a huge benefit to our residents and should be inclusive for all. Huntingdonshire District Council choose to invest in our open spaces for exactly the same reasons. The open space team I see as a hub on the wheel of the open spaces with many spokes connecting to our other service areas and the shareholders. Like with a wheel on all parts, all the parts must work together to keep the parts stable. You will see in a slide which shows you 10 different spokes, the services, the service areas of all which are vital to make our open spaces work for residents and the visitors in Huntingdonshire. So I will pass this on to our experts, our officers. Let me just introduce Dave, because this is Dave. I'm not going to embarrass you. He is our newest member of the team. Is it last year you joined?
July this year. Yeah,
Last year.
last year.
But no, Dave's been brilliant. He's not new to HDC. Many of you will know him previously in his role as manager. Yep. So he's already making a positive difference to the team and the positive impact to the district. All yours, Dave.
Thank you very much. There's. I think you may know me from my previous role in street cleansing. So I joined Open Spaces in July last year, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It's been a bit of a whirlwind. I couldn't have asked for a better team or manager to work with and work for. Without further ado, let's crack on. So, quick update. Wanted to discuss who we are, a bit about our healthy open spaces strategy that you may have remembered from a couple of years back. Current projects that we're working on, a look at how we benchmark the recognition and collaboration, and then what we're going to be doing going forward in the future. So, without further ado, next slide. Sorry. So, I wanted to talk about, or just wanted to try and demonstrate how open spaces touches, or it meets and helps on all of the priorities in the corporate plan, particularly the improving quality of life for local people. It's a well-known fact that open space can improve, or walking in an open space can help improve your mental health, physical health, and an overall well-being. Also, without saying too much, goes on creating a better hunting industry for future generations. So I just thought it was quite a nice introduction in actually how open spaces meet our corporate plan objectives. Next slide, please. So this kind of leads off. leads or feeds back from what Councillor Taylor was saying about the size of the team that we have. So there's me sandwiched between Helen and my team there. So I've got 4 members of staff that report directly into me, 2 of which are part-time, 2 are full-time. So we are quite a compact team, and I think we get through quite a lot of good work, considering the size of the team. But I think that's just a testament to the passion and experience that we've got in the team as well, and the will to want to improve Huntingdonshire in the open spaces. Next slide. So this is the wheel that Councillor Taylor was talking about, and I think what it demonstrates is that we're in the middle there, open spaces, but we touch pretty much every area of local authority or local government in Huntingdonshire. So you can see on there we've got things like development management. So in open spaces, we'll be asked to comment on plans or for larger developments. We obviously feed into the buyer for all that you just heard from Nick and Helen for, and leisure and health goes without saying. We active lifestyles in our open spaces, So yeah, I mean that was just to really show that how we can affect or are affected by the rest of the departments in the Huntingdonshire District Council. Next slide. So this is a bit of an update on the Healthy Open Spaces strategy from a couple of years ago. I'm going to ask Helen to cover that for me, because that was a bit before my time.
Good evening, everyone, again. This is me in my Open Spaces hat on. So some of you might remember we adopted a Healthy Open Spaces strategy a couple of years ago now. We did the engagement for it with our communities during COVID. So it was when it was very cool and trendy to be on a Zoom meeting. And we actually as a result of that, got some really good engagement at the time. It was before everyone sort of was absolutely exhausted by it. As with the strategy, we built in a vision that we work towards, which is about enjoying our parks and open spaces for the benefit of their health and well-being. I think we didn't realise quite how important this was at the time. It hit right at the point where people were very much rediscovering their open spaces in the local areas. Within the strategy, there are 4 key theme areas, of which the team have key actions for. We have Shape Your Space, which is very much about working with the communities and thinking about what they want and how we can deliver it and how we can shape our services for that. So that's almost coming back to our previous conversations with Nick about making sure that biodiversity solution actually fits the community around it. We've got Create Your Space, and this is more about creating those communities around our open spaces and connecting with them. One in particular that's quite close to my heart is tackling social isolation and how open spaces can actually be used to actually help connect with people. Celebrate Your Space is about actually telling people what we've got and being better at our social media, things like that. So over the last couple of years, hopefully you've noticed a bit more of a flurry of information coming through open spaces. And Reinvigorate Your Space is about thinking about doing things differently. So that's a little bit of a hint as to sort of how Dave and the team are sort of starting to think about alternative funding and how we can actually sort of deliver better for less. Next slide, please. The strategy has quite a extensive action plan, which, as you can see there, I don't know whether you can make it out from the slides or not, but there's quite a few actions there. And what we've done is divided them into short, medium, and long-term actions, and those that have been started and those are ongoing and completed. As you can see, we've actually made inroads into some of the ones with the long-term actions as well. Some of them are very sort of connected to each other, so it was very difficult to try and put down on paper what we actually wanted to happen. The team are working their way through it at the moment to review it. So hopefully in the next sort of 12 months or so, you will have seen a series of updated actions coming through, so you can see what we've been up to. Next slide, please. And this is just a typical Helen slide of those of you that have known me for long enough, where I just put everything on one page. It's just a bit of food for thought, really, just to give you just a little flick around of the bits and pieces that open spaces get up to. You can see the Priory Park FC down the bottom right hand corner. They have grown immensely over the last few years and have been fantastic at securing funding for Priory Park. Then we've also got our different events that we've been doing. We've got our bee posts right in the middle. If you can, they're a new thing for me, but that's very much about our biodiversity. And then in the top, in the middle, if you're lucky, you can probably see me doing some aerobics in the middle there somewhere. That was very much about us doing some open space exercise in the open space. It was a free activity that people could come along and understand how to feel better in the outside. Next slide, please. And I'll hand you back to Dave.
Thank you very much. So this was a bit of a summary on what we're currently working on, what we have been working on, and I'll go into a bit more detail in these in the next few slides. But I've picked the main projects that we've really been working on, and Helen touched on the alternate funding, the strategic park development, protecting our open spaces, an accessible play audit, and also looking at the way we manage events and income generation within our open spaces. Next slide, please. So, alternative funding, it kind of is what it says on the tin. Historically, a lot of the projects or funding that we've had in open spaces has come from Section 106 funds or seal bids. But with the introduction of the biodiversity net gain contributions, it gives us another avenue of looking at ways of funding going forward, as well as looking at other grants and funding streams that we can use. Strategic park development. This goes hand in hand with the biodiversity for all, and what Helen was saying about engagement with the community around the sites. It's something that myself and the team are passionate about and want to get involved in. And it's an exciting piece of work that I think will just be will put Huntingdonshire at the forefront. I think personally, but yeah. Next slide. Protecting our open spaces. So this is about. So the Fields in Trust are commissioned a report that essentially said that they want everybody to be within a 10-minute walk of an open space. That's the target. What does that mean for us? In terms of the open space in Huntingdonshire, it means that actually we want to try and register more of our open space with the Fields in Trust to be able to protect it and keep it accessible for the residents of Huntingdonshire. And accessible play was the next one. This is a big bit of work that we've been doing. It involves auditing all of our play equipment and play areas across the district. Some of which are quite old, but still perfectly workable. But it's about how accessible they are. Are they stuck in the middle of a field somewhere? Can everybody use them? And then what can we do as a council to perhaps improve those play areas and make them more accessible? So it's about coming up with a plan. We're quite a way through this now. The play areas have been audited. We're just coming up with a report and a plan to go forward. So that's a good bit of work that I'm sure you'll be hearing about more in the future. Next slide. Events management and income generation. So this to me is about using our space differently. I know we use our open spaces, and other people use our open spaces for things like I don't know, fairs or festivals and whatnot. But to me, it's about how we can use them differently. Is there areas that we don't use at the moment that we can use? And it's just about thinking differently and looking at different ways of generating that income, whether that might be through concessions or or partnering with third parties to secure new activities. It doesn't necessarily have to be us that runs events. It could be that we look to partner someone that could run them for us. But yeah, so to me that's quite an important one with the space that we've got and the brilliant open spaces that we've got. I think it's an untapped resource. But yeah, next slide. This is quite close to my heart, benchmarking recognition. Having worked in street cleansing for a long while, APSI is synonymous with that role. So for those of you who don't know what APSI is, it's an association for public service excellence, and what that allows us to do is benchmark against other local authorities across or other not say like-minded, but like for like authorities across the country. So at the moment, we are just waiting for the report to come through for APSI, and I'm hoping that we have the same responses the same results we had before. I've just listed a couple down there, which are we have the second highest number of hectares of open spaces per frontline member of staff, or 38 hectares per frontline member of staff. That includes your grounds maintenance operatives as well. We have the lowest cost per household at £17.28 per household, and we have the second lowest maintenance cost per hectare of maintained land as well. So they're very good figures, and the figures that actually generally you may not have seen before. Green Flag Awards, you may well already be aware that we have some Green Flag Award-winning open spaces within the district. Priory Park, Little Paxton Nature Reserve and Hinchinbrook Country Park. We're in the process of applying to get the green flag for St Neots Riverside Park as well. So that application is due in this month, and all being well, we'll get another green flag. So that'll be a good one. And then next slide. And then finally, this is a bit of a touch of what we're going to be doing going forward. What does the open spaces? What do our open spaces look like for the future? And there's a few things down here that are very exciting to me. So I'll go through them very quickly. Nature-based play. So looking at our play equipment, looking at our play areas, what can we do? That will go hand in hand with the play need or the play accessibility assessment that we're doing at the moment. It's not always about the old school metal swings and metal climbing frames. What can we do to work with the biodiversity for all guys as well? Leads nicely onto the play needs assessment as well. Have we got the play equipment? Is it in the right place? So we're looking at the accessibility, but also, is it in the right place? Have we got a big bit out in the middle of nowhere that never gets used? Do we need to do that? And we're looking at working with St Neots Town Council as a bit of a pilot to actually work with them and doing those play needs assessments. This next one, the accessibility audit, is one that's quite close to my heart as well. It's so we're looking at running or working with the Sensory Trust around carrying out a full accessibility audit of our open spaces, or a select few open spaces to start with. So actually, how accessible are our open spaces to everybody? Can everybody make use of them? It's I think it will give us a good grounding going forward and a good plan of action to be able to move the service forward for the next 5 to 10 years once we've got that done as well. Community gardening and urban agriculture. It's something that you often see on the news or read about, and it's something that I think we really could be pushed more within the district. BNG funding, that's biodiversity net gain funding as well. As mentioned in the alternative funding, it's something that we're going to look at utilising. Green skills projects, That was touched on earlier on, about working with groundworks to give people, unemployed people more confidence or more skills to be able to get them back into the workforce. And events and commerciality is how we can look at different ways of generating income with our open spaces. So, and the next slide. I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening. And any questions?
I just wanted to add how proud I am of that team. I have sat where Dave's sitting. He took that. I was in that role for a long time, and he has picked it up very quickly. And actually, I'm very excited to see some of the projects coming through. For next year, specifically the accessible audit. I think that will be a really interesting piece of work, especially alongside the biodiversity work that the Bio for All team are going to be doing. Hopefully, you could start to see the sort of the dovetailing of different bits in there to bringing it into our business as usual, and thinking a little bit further than the Biodiversity for All programme, and thinking about how we can create a legacy for it, make sure it's connected into the activities we're doing on a day-to-day basis. I'll open it for questions.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, I just want to thank you for your presentation, and your enthusiasm and excitement for the work you do is so clear. And I want to thank you because Councillor Taylor's right. You are amazing. 6 of you, you're amazing, and I really appreciate the work you do. Questions, comments? Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, very good presentation. Thanks, David. And as we met earlier on, we've communicated for about 3 years, I think, and never actually met. So it's nice to meet you in person. Just quickly, we talk about third-party funding, where we can get additional funding, and it's a discussion I've had many times with Oliver, and and we talk about open spaces and mental health, and the benefits it has for being in open spaces. How are we engaging with our health partners, the NHS and stuff like that, to the benefits of what this brings to our residents, and how we can maybe potentially explore funding with the NHS?
Thank you for your comments. So that was really the main ethos of the Healthy Open Spaces strategy. So what we want to do as part of that is make sure we're connected in with those community groups. It's a two-prong attack. So within attack sounds horrible. Sorry, connection. In terms of a strategic connection, we're making sure we're connected into the council and making sure we're on committees at the NHS. But then also on a lower level, we're making sure we're connected in with community groups such as the Oxmoor Community Action Group, those kind of things. So we're actually trying to connect it from both sides. So we're not just having isolated conversations; they're connected through. So.
Thank you, Chair. If we go back to that spoke, so within that, and Dave mentioned within the leisure, we've got active lifestyle. So the active lifestyle team is connected to the NHS and the integrated care system, and the board. So a lot of funding comes from that, and it's also connected the active lifestyle to Healthy You, which is part of CCC funding. So a lot of the funding and that link comes through our active lifestyle, which then use our open spaces to deliver that active lifestyle. So yeah, that's what I mean about spokes, and we're the hub. The open space is the hub, and everything else of it is instrumental to what happens in our open spaces.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Beck.
Thank you. This really excites me because something that I've really been pushing for, certainly through the town council over the last couple of years, is looking at more accessible play equipment and actually looking at the locations of that to make sure that it's being used. One of the things I wanted to ask around, and obviously looking at that accessibility, and it's really nice that I just heard mention of active lifestyles. One of the things that I have approached you with previously is outdoor gym equipment, and whether that's something that you will also be considering as an option, because there are areas across the district where people just cannot afford to go to the gym, but are keen to exercise, and just whether that is something that is potentially being considered.
Thank you for your question. So at District Council, we were an early adopter of the outdoor gym. So we had one at Connygere when Connygere was ours, before we it was Connygere, yeah. So we were actually gifted it by Wicksteed at the time, so that we could actually test it for them. It didn't come without its complications. So as time's gone on, I think the equipment's got better and better. So we will be looking at actually implementing some of it. But what I would say is it seems to be working better. Little Paxton Parish Council, I've got a fantastic facility there, but they've got quite focused groups so instead of like individual use, they're actually arranging classes and things like that on it, and that seems to be creating a bit more of a community and respect around the equipment, because we have had issues in the past over vandalism and things like that. So it's very much still on the plate. It's just right place for it and things like that, and making sure that there's a wraparound for it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Thank you, Chair. It's one thing I wanted to pick up on was the development of the parks and the major projects. I think I was only talking to someone on Saturday at Parkrun at Hinchinbrook how facilities in Huntingdonshire have developed, not just Hinchinbrook but Grafham Water. Thinking about them, how the park I remember as a child in the 60s and 70s, how the facilities have grown, but there's still plenty of space to go and get lost, if that's what someone wants. And I was thinking about Priory Park in particular as well, that as this presentation was going on, that Priory Park, even when there's football going on, I can remember taking my now 28-year-old son there to Colts football, and the parking being sort of rammed down Huntingdon Street, Huntingdon Road, up Priory Hill. And even then, when it was busy, there's still space to go to get peace and quiet, even when activities are going on. But where do we get the balance between serving the residents that are within walking distance of a park, like, well, we use Priory Park as an example, and those people that have to or want to drive and experience Priory Park without disturbing what it is, without providing enough parking to ease congestion, but also not spoiling the effects of the facility?
I think if you've got the key to that, that would be fantastic, actually. Car parking can be emotive, as you know, and obviously we've had the conversation earlier on this evening. Priory Park itself has a small car park, as we know, but the residents around there work with us and communicate with us on a regular basis about the larger events and things that happen there. In terms of actually knowing what needs to be put in, it's very much about that community conversation that we're going to have. Priory Park is one of our strategic sites in our short terms that Nick was talking you through. So Priory Park will actually be having quite a significant investment, and in terms of stakeholder communication in that area. So hopefully, as part of that, we'll be able to tease out those residents in that area, what their priorities are and what their concerns are going forwards. The park itself, like you said, is massive and it's beautiful. We've got some tools, and we didn't mention it here, but we've actually using a new tool at Hinchinbrook, which actually is able to analyse mobile phone data. It's completely anonymised, but what it does is, before you think it's a big brother, but what it does is it gives us ideas of where areas in the park that aren't used and has limited dwell time, so we can actually identify areas of the park that are being used heavily. Let's not mess with those, because people obviously love those spaces, but if there's spaces that literally no one moves into, maybe they're the areas that we can move over to our biodiversity and make them more quiet spaces. So in answer to your question, I don't have the answer, but hopefully when we start talking to those residents, we will give them reassurance that actually we will be listening to them.
Can I say, thank you, Chair, just on the subject of Priory Park, that yes, there has been issues there. There have been double yellow lines put in for passing spaces, so that makes it a little bit easier. But I think we have to remind residents as well, there are car parks a little bit further away, HDC car parks, which can be used as well. And then you just walk up Huntingdon Street. So there are places to park, but you just need to walk.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Hunt.
I just wanted to pull out one of the figures on the slide earlier on the kind of award section of, if I read the slide right, the £17.28, is that lowest compared to all the other local authorities? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I should have clarified that at the time. It's within our family group. So as part of the benchmarking process, APSI will put I keep saying like-minded, like for like councils in family groups. So that will be within our family group. But I'm happy to provide you some more detail on that if you like.
Well, I just want to put up just to highlight it because I think it's an absolutely brilliant stat that we are in that family group. I would say for the excellent services that your team should rightfully be proud of and that my residents get for just £17.28 a year is insanely good. And I think being the best in that group is a fantastic achievement. I just wanted to highlight that. So, yeah, thank you.
Can I just add to that as well? Actually, that does include the grounds maintenance team that aren't here as well. So, yeah, it's just to clarify that as well.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you so much, and do send our thanks to the rest of the team as well, and let them know how much we appreciate them, and thank you for a brilliant presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So to our final agenda item, number 7, update on reducing the carbon impact of council facilities. We're going to receive a presentation from Councillor Hassel. Thank you, Councillor Hassel and officers.
Thank you, Chair. So, firstly, can I just wish everyone a happy new year? And secondly, I'd just like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity to present to you on something that isn't the garden waste subscription service. Okay, so this is an update on reducing the carbon impact of council facilities, and I'd like to introduce you to our facilities manager, Matt Raby, and also our energy sustainability officer, Kerry Slater. They haven't presented to the ONS before, so I'm really pleased to be able to lead them into this presentation. Fortunately, I've only got the first couple of slides. So if I have the next slide, please. Okay, so decarbonisation. I think you're probably familiar with this concept. It's literally removing carbon dioxide, generally in the form of carbon dioxide from a country's economy, or in this case, HDC's facilities. And within HD, we have three key priorities. One is the decarbonisation of our fleet, reducing our energy use by moving to renewables. I think you're all familiar with that, solar panels and the like. And then the third one, which is to procure wisely. So this is trying to use vendors who are as green as we would like them to be and as green as we are.
just to remind councillors that in our climate strategy, we're aiming towards being net carbon zero by 2040. And I also wanted to highlight to you a statistic in the latest Climate Energy UK scorecard results, in the fact that HDC scored 96 out of 164 district councils. So to put it in footballing terms, are about mid-table. And that's, that doesn't sound too great, does it? But if you go back about 12 to 18 months ago, we were zero. Yeah, we were bottom of the league. We were in the relegation zone. So to bring us up to 96 is really, really good, and it's testament to the hard work by the team and the council as well to bring us up. And yeah, let's as we move forward, let's hope that we can climb that league table to be much higher and in the playoff positions. So, if I have the next slide, please. One of the things I think is really important about how we've approached this, or how Matt and the team have approached this, is it's not just that we've just taken council money and we have spent it on renewables or so on and so forth. We've applied for a lot of grants. So some of those grant bodies there's SALIX, the Solving Energy Efficient Finance in the Public Sector, the Low Carbon Skills Fund, and also the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme. So there's a number of grant bodies that have helped us to move up this league table. And if I can have the next slide, please. So just to remind members that we have both capital and revenue streams, and what the team has done really is to use the Low Carbon Skills Fund to really use all the research and the scoping and the planning. So applying for grants that enables us to, for example, to assess our buildings to see whether we can put more solar panels and things like that, comes out of the Low Carbon Skills Funds. And this enables us to apply for the capital grants, so the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, the SALIX, which is match funding, and for also this preparation to do things like help Sawtrey swimming pool with the Swim England Phase 2 projects. So without further ado, because I really don't want to steal thunder here, there is an awful lot of detail to come, and you can show how much work has been done. And I'd just like to, at this point, just congratulate the team really for all the hard work in this area. And as you will go through the presentation, you'll see there's a lot of work has done. So is it Matt? I'm handing over to you. No, over to Kerry. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hassel. So moving on the screen, just to give you a bit more of understanding of SALIX Recycling Fund. So we put in £75,000, which is match funded by SALIX. So they put in an additional £75,000. Through the savings that we create, we are then able to reuse the money to carry out more projects to improve our energy efficiency throughout our facilities. Now, unfortunately, the slide wasn't big enough, so I wasn't able to share all the information with you. But what we have been able to do around 45 projects through the Recycling Fund. As you can see on there is just some examples of what we've been able to achieve across Eatfield House, Pathfinder House, and the leisure centres. On the table, you can see where we were before the projects were completed, so our annual kilowatt usage to what we've been able to save. We also included our annual savings, so you're looking at around nearly £29,000 we've been able to save annually through completing just these projects on the screen. And then obviously the annual CO2 tonnage saved as well. So you're looking at around 180,000 just on those projects. So what does that actually mean? What is the annual CO2 saving? So if we can have the next slide, please. So hopefully this is a little bit easier to understand. Now what we've done here is we've included all 45 projects that we've been able to complete through the Recycling Fund. Okay, so our annual CO2 saving we've been able to save so far through the figures that we've been received through SALIX is 912 tonnes. Okay, but what does that mean? So if you look at the car, we're looking at about 4 million miles in a car. And interesting fact, around the world from the equator, you're looking at 25,000 miles all the way around. So we're doing a few trips around the world from the savings that we've made. And then looking at heating up an electric sauna, this is from cold to warm, you're looking at nearly 200,000 times. And then cubic meters of trees, 1,008. So through the scheme, we've been doing it since 2010. It is coming towards the end, which we'll go into a couple more projects that we've got going on through our final funding that we have through Salix. So next slide, please. So as some of you may be aware, we're going through currently mid-project an LED lighting upgrade at Pathfinder House. Now, to date, this has been our most expensive project through Salix, being just over £100,000. You'll see from the annual savings, you're looking at nearly 61% on our kilowatt usage. So this equates to a full boil kettle. You're looking at about 540,000 kettles. So it's a lot of tea we're making there. We're looking at a payback with 5.5 years with this and an annual saving of just over 20,000. As I mentioned, we are midway through the project at the moment, so we are waiting for the commissioning side. We're hoping to finish this project by the middle of January. But we've already noticed significant improvement for our half-hourly data as well, from how much electric we are saving from having this upgrade so far. Next slide, please. Councillor Hassel commented on the Swim England funding. So again, I just want to go into a bit more detail. There was 2 pots of funding accessible through the Swim England funding. There was phase 1, which was 20 million. Now this was aimed more for the leisure centres with swimming pools that were struggling with the increase of utility costings. We did apply for all our leisure centres. We also supported local sites such as Godmanchester and Sawtry. Unfortunately, One Leisure wasn't successful, but Sawtry was successful in gaining nearly or around £38,000, which we were really happy to be able to support them with that. We've currently done our applications for all the One Leisure sites, as well as supporting again Godmanchester and Sawtry for the phase 2. Now this is more in capital investment, so you're looking at 40 million. So this is to help with projects to improve the energy efficiency of the facilities for the medium to long term. We haven't yet received the figures back from that yet, or the results, but hopefully towards the end of the month we should hear back what funding we've been able to secure through that. Some of the things that we have requested for funding is additional PV panels, as well as new pool covers on some of our sites. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand over to Matt. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerry, and welcome. Thanks for everyone here to inviting us to come today. So I'm going to run through a few of the projects that have been completed. For the eagle-eyed ones of you out there, you'll have seen that when we put the presentation together, in every corner of the slide, it showed where we got the funding through to be able to complete that. So the next 2 slides that we're going to run through is where we got the funding through the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So if you heard about it at the time around 2020, 2021, the government were offering £1 billion funding for decarbonisation, known as PSDS1. I think we're on about 3B, 3C now. So there's been a number of schemes since, but this one was the only one to date that has been 100% funded. So within that, we put in 2 bids, one for Pathfinder House, one for One Leisure Ramsey, which fortunately were both successful. So I'm just going to run through those. Starting with Pathfinder House, we replaced all 4 air handling units on the roof, installation of 2 air source heat pumps that feed the air handling units. We replaced 2 of the ICT chillers. We did a small section of LEDs, basically to use up the rest of the funding that we had to make use of every penny. And then the brains behind it all, really, the building management system. That really enables us to kind of make the savings. So within that, it's got the time clocks built in, it's got all the temperatures, making sure that we have got everything set up to run as efficiently as possible. Now, this work was predicted to save around 200 carbon tonnes from the Salix tool that we used on application. Total project cost of just under 1.5 million pounds for this one, but what that enabled to do, as I said, it was 100% funded, but it also allowed us to replace aging equipment. So we didn't have to kind of look at that coming out of our own kind of budget or looking at capital bids. So it was really helpful. And obviously, what we've done is achieved less CO2 output. Just in terms of figures, so that update allowed us to save 150,000 kilowatts within the first full year of running. We haven't completed a second year as yet on those figures, but we're looking to save around the same sort of figure. We'll be totally honest with in terms of where we are at the time. We were looking at making a £13,000 saving on utilities, but as you'll all know, the utilities took a massive hike just as we started the projects. So unfortunately, the utility budgets are more than anticipated, but as we've said before, we've kind of had the equipment replaced effectively through a funding pot, so it does kind of ease that a little bit. So moving on to One Leisure Ramsey, that was a slightly bigger change. So they relied heavily on gas with the swimming pool. So we had 2 air source heat pumps installed, a new air handling unit, LED throughout, replacement of all the windows, as they had some wooden windows there. So we updated those to double glazed. We replaced the roof. So it was a good opportunity to get a good new insulated roof on there. Again, the building management system, we did external cladding and cavity wall insulation. So there is more there because that needed more work, obviously, than Pathfinder House, with Pathfinder being much newer and much more efficient already. So Ramsey was approximately 2.3 million in terms of that level of investment, and we've had some great savings there of 371,000 kilowatts within the first 12 months it was operational. It's very similar to look at a similar outturn for the following 12 months as well. Again, obviously, I'll mention the utility budget, but we are making great savings, and again, the CO2 saving and that equipment there was way beyond its life expectancy, so it was very, very needed. But yeah, two great projects. We haven't applied for any more PSDS funding as yet because it does require internal investment, which I'll come on to a little bit later anyway. But yeah, on to the next slide, please. So across a number of our sites, the one pictured, we've got Eastfield House, but we do have solar PV at all of the leisure centres except Ramsey and obviously Eastfield House. Eastfield House is our largest system, where we've got a 228 kilowatt system, which
on average saves us around 160,000 kilowatts of usage every year, which is fantastic. And again, we have got the added benefit of CO2 savings within that site. I'll flick on to the next slide. Basically, Kerry and myself have been working with a couple of contractors who, this is just the information from one of them that they've produced for us. So we're looking at installing one PV at One Leisure Ramsey to assist with the utility costs, but as well as adding additional PV to Huntingdon Dry Side, One Leisure St Ives Indoor and Outdoor, and One Leisure St Neots. Also, the wet side as well at Huntingdon. The reason that we've added in this one here is, as we know, the roof on the sports hall is brand new. We're not going to require a replacement within the next 20-25 years. So we have actually worked with One Leisure and put in a capital bid for this year of £120,000. And as you can see by the savings, it pays itself back within sort of 3.5 years. So it's kind of to put it on the forefront, really, that these are the type of investments going forward to reduce our utility bills with good paybacks that we can be looking at. Just to put it on a different perspective. So, for example, One Leisure St Ives indoor centre, where I don't think we've got 20-25 years left in the roof, we've looked at what a structure would be, some canopies in the car park. That takes the paybacks to about 10 years because of obviously the purchase of the structure itself and installation. So it does add, but it's still a very, very good payback when we're looking at around sort of £65,000 a year saving potentially on energy. Next slide, please. So that kind of takes us to where we are now. We've obviously done the degas at One Leisure Ramsey. We've degassed the Civic Suite. We are currently working with some local contractors where we got awarded 266,000 through the Low Carbon Skills Fund, and what that's enabled us to do is have designs and actual costs in terms of what it would cost us to degas Pathfinder House itself, Eastfield House, as well as One Leisure Huntingdon Dry Side. So that £266,000, as I say, allows us to work with the contractors to produce a design, and that'll also include planning permission as well. We're looking to get planning on these projects, so we know that will last 3 years. So we've got 3 years to be able to kind of look at possible funding outlets. As I mentioned, the PSDS funding, we had 100% funding first time around, but the current rate is approximately 30%. So if I used One Leisure Huntingdon as an example, we had some indicative figures completed in 2021 where with solar panels, it would cost between 1.5 and £2 million to degas that site and install solar. So if we're looking at a 30% funding, then obviously it would require investment. But when that can be coupled with sort of replacement of equipment is due to be on there, then that's really where I think that we need to be looking moving forward. But what this will do is give us that data to have actual figures for us to work out where we need to be. So we should have that completed within the next couple of months. Whether we'll be ready in terms of investment to apply for the next expected PSDS funding in sort of September this year because of the funding side. But there is the opportunity that funding will increase as we get closer to the government's net zero by 2030. I mean, we're 2040, but I think if they're setting it at 2030, then they hopefully that they will increase the level of funding available. So that's something that we're looking out for. But I mean, they're the big wins in terms of CO2 savings. On the smaller side, myself and Kerry have been working with another solar company who also supply wind turbines. So we just next week we've got some site meetings. I'll call them the lollipop style wind turbines. We've had some images produced, or we should have put it in the slide really, of what it might look like on the roof here at Pathfinder House. They did it in our colours and things like that, but they're the kind of other things that we're looking at, as well as further investment into the building management side, where we can maybe tweak out more savings through making sure that the equipment's set up exactly as it needs to be. I think that concludes everything that kind of we've had, and it's exciting times for us really. There's a lot going on in terms of decarbonisation and energy saving, so it is only a small proportion of our role, but obviously it is really good to be involved with that. So thank you. If you've got any questions, obviously we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, and well done for getting us into mid-table. You've worked hard, and I can see that now. Thank you. Questions or comments from the panel? Councillor Alban.
That's fantastic to listen to. I can remember going to a parish council meeting in my ward and explaining what we were doing, or the concept of what we were doing at Pathfinder House, and One Leisure Ramsey, and saying that the district council's not just there as trying to set an example, but also put what we're doing into practice, and to see it come to fruition and to make the kind of savings and the environmental impact, I think is fantastic. Just a technical question on Pathfinder House itself. I've learned quite a bit this evening in a short space of time during the meeting, before the meeting, about the changing of the LED light bulbs. I drove, just happened to be Christmas night, was driving past, and the building was lit up. And I've been interested to know where we are on changing the light bulbs, and that this won't happen, because I'm keen to avoid the picture that we're painting, that the opposite effect, that we're showing a building lit up. But I've learned that this is part of the process of changing the light bulb. So a bit more background as to where we are, and that the future of the building won't be lit up at night. That things will be responsive, and we will continue to be saving money by turning lights off.
Yeah, thank you for that one. It just so fell that this particular LED project fell over the Christmas period. So part of the installation, so we're with about 85% complete, with only a floor left to go. And everything hasn't been commissioned yet, so the commissioning we're hoping is to take place week commencing the 15th, 22nd of January, is to be firmed up. At that point, everything will be commissioned. All the daylight sensors, as well as harvesting, will be set up, and the lights will turn off. Yeah, it's purely just because it's fallen at that time of the year that they were on over the Christmas period.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I think that really goes to show it's worth asking a few questions. I've learned myself not to think, well, there must be a reason behind that. So to know the reason, and it's all part of the progress, that's really reassuring.
Thank you. Councillor Bywater.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Really good. This is what I became a councillor for, to see the efficiencies of local government, and I think it just proves that it takes time, but we've done a really good job. We're talking about 2010, I think the earliest one, wasn't it? So really, I haven't got a question for you, and it's also just a thank you in relation to the work you've been doing for Sawtry, and I've got my fingers crossed as well. So thank you very much.
You can speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say, I think Councillor Orban summed it up really around the leadership in terms of us as a council. And one of the things I've said to the team, and indeed Helen and the wider team, is what's so great about the presentations you've seen tonight is actually we don't just do the talk and talk and talk and talk. We're actually, as a council, walking the walk as well. And we are demonstrating clear leadership for our partners in our community, that our expectation of others is matched by our own ambition. And I think it's been a fantastic evening of presentations this evening to see across the board the ambition, but also you've also touched on tonight passion and enthusiasm. And in fact, I've just emailed the team to say passion and enthusiasm used to be dirty words in local government. It used to be that's not how we do things. We don't do that in local government. It's a grey box of bureaucracy. But how can we inspire our partners, our community, each other, if we can't demonstrate that passion, that enthusiasm, that desire to do better and make a difference? So for me, as your chief exec tonight, sat here listening to fantastic presentations and listening to your questions, we have a council and an officer corps to be really proud of. Because again, I come back to that strength of leadership. It means when we go and talk to our partners, when we talk to our communities, we're doing the doing, and we're able to put that's credit in our back pocket for the next round of funding, the evidence bases, the next challenge that we want to work with, the next partnership opportunity. We're able to demonstrate we're in that space and we're able to be part of that delivery. So again, I just felt, to sum up tonight, it's been a really fantastic evening of what this council is achieving, and really great officer corps there. So thank you for allowing me to just come in there.
Thank you, Michelle. And I echo that. I feel so excited to be part of this team. We're so making things happen is what I'm seeing, and achieving amazing things. It's just incredible. I'm just very, very proud to be part of the HDC setup. Anybody else have any comments or questions? In that, then we'll wrap up, and thank you so much, officers. Really appreciate the presentations today.